Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I was just going to say it's not a Black Friday for me, but I'm wearing my black vest and my interior is black. I had brought my computer today. I'm here again waiting for my husband, and I have a little time. So I thought I would just do another video. I got a lot of people sending me messages, private messages telling me how much they're enjoying these just kind of off the cuff live video thoughts that I'm having. Hi, Griselda. And so I brought my computer this time. I'm using my phone as a hotspot. You know why? So I can see your chat. Hi, Jen. Nice to see you. So I have, 20-ish, maybe 30 minutes to talk today. So not going to be a lengthy thing today at all. But today's current thoughts, and they're about glitches and strange things going on. There was a post on our forum, and that's the quantumhealers.com forum for practitioners. We talk to each other about cases, sessions, but we also talk about this kind of stuff, very strange things that are happening in our world. And this morning's post that got me thinking was somebody who posted, gosh, I'm going to even forget who posted it, so forgive me if you're listening or listen to this later, but somebody was talking about showing up someplace where they always go, walking straight up to somebody, saying something to them, a friend, and the friend just sort of blanks out, and so they walk over to the side, and she said she felt invisible for a while, and then she was asking about possibly actually being invisible. And there was a lot of fun response to this post, a lot of different things, and one is, this idea of being in a different reality, right next to it, a different version of reality. Another one is this idea of vibrating so high, particularly after doing a quantum healing session, which I believe was the case in this story, where you're vibrating so high that the person that she may have been trying to talk to doesn't see her. So how is this possible? Well, you can think about it very simply and directly in this way. If you, for example, if you're looking at a box fan, right? A fan of any kind, but say like a box fan, it's got blades, right? And if you turn the fan on and the fan goes very slow, you can still watch the blades. But if you turn the fan very high, same with the ceiling fan, right? If you turn it very fast, the blades go so fast and you can't see them. So the idea is that it may be when you're vibrating so high, you literally become invisible, maybe at least at times, when you're trying to talk to some people who aren't in the same exact vibration. So that's an interesting thought. It also brought to mind, and I've talked about this before in other videos, so you might have heard me say this before. I had this thing happened to me, and this was many years ago, but I still vividly remember it. Why? Because it's the one and only time I experienced such a thing. I was doing something very mundane. I was folding laundry. I was just folding laundry, and I happened to look down towards my feet for whatever reason, and I started from my toes all the way up to my feet. I started watching my body disappear. Yes, I absolutely was watching. Just, it was like going away. Now my feet felt solid. They felt like they were on the floor, but I'm looking down at my feet and I'm seeing the bed and I'm seeing the floor and I'm seeing the things around it, and it's going like up my legs like this, and I'm watching as this is going up my shins, up to my knees, and I'm seeing through all of it as this, there was a real movement right from the front of my feet up like this, and I'm watching, and it goes up it goes up my thighs, and I'm doing the rubbing my eyes and like, what am I seeing here? And at this point I'm kind of freaking out, because I'm wondering, well, if this goes all the way up, am I going to just, poof, be gone? Is it some sort of spontaneous combustion setup? Is it some sort of disappearance setup? Am I going to blink out of reality? And I remember just sort of walking, I broke the whole thing, and I walked around a little bit, and suddenly my feet were back, and who even knows what that was, but that experience has really stuck with me. So I wondered about that. But there's a lot of people talking about things like glitches. And so right after doing this, before coming on this errand today, one of the first things I did was I went over to the door, and I saw this beautiful, beautiful bald eagle land on the elm trees that are past our house. So there, I'm in a park right now, but the elm trees are about as far away from my house as maybe this pine tree, maybe a little further than that. Anyway, this beautiful bald eagle lands on this tree, and my husband was there, and we have binoculars right there where we watch the birds and the other animals and the horses and stuff. And so the bald eagle lands, and I'm admiring it, and I know we're getting ready to go on this appointment here this morning, and we have a couple dogs, and so I get the binoculars and I want to go look at it because I want to see if it's a juvenile or not. And I said, come on, dogs, it's time. You should go outside before we go on this errand today. This is time for you to go out to the yard for a little bit before coming back in. And I let them back in because it's in the 30s, and my one dog is a beastly. He doesn't have an undercoat, so he'd be cold outside. So the idea was I'm going to let the dogs in and let the dogs back out. And off they run into the yard, and I look and I'm standing just right by the door, right? I don't go off the deck. I don't anything. I'm just right by the door. I let the dogs out, and I'm looking with my binoculars, and I'm so happy to see this bald eagle. We have lots of golden eagles, but it's been a little while since I've seen a bald eagle land on our farm. So I just right outside the door, I don't even think I had shoes on. And that's one of the reasons I didn't go far. I turn around, I grab the binoculars, I gave them to my husband. I said, come look at the bald eagle. And he's like, well, it's about time to go. My appointment's starting soon. You better get dressed. And so I hand him the binoculars. I go to get dressed, and I come back. And he's still looking at the eagle. And this is just a few minutes, right? Because I think maybe I was partly dressed, or maybe I put my shoes on. I just finished getting dressed. And I come back, and he hands the binoculars to me, and I set them in the place where we keep the binoculars. And he says, shouldn't we let the dogs out before we go? And I'm like, they were outside. And he's like, no, they weren't. And he points, and right next to him was the dog bed, and the dogs are just laying there sound asleep. And I'm like, what? Well, you must have let them in. He says, no, I didn't. I was just standing right here by the door. I don't even have my shoes on, kind of like me, right? And so did I have a faulty memory? Did it really work? Did it not work? Glitch. And one of the things that I said in my response to the forum post about this person being invisible was, I am absolutely convinced this is happening. I think it's always happened. Okay, this is not something brand new. I think that things like this have always happened, but we are noticing them more, and we are less likely to pass them off as misremembering. And if you think about it, there's no way that they could be more than just momentary experiences right now, because we're just getting used to the concept of things blinking and being able to phase shift in and out of body, not body, physicality, this reality, that reality. But here's what I know. Hi, Sherry. Here's what I know. The more you think about this, and the more you entertain this idea, and if you're interested in it, I don't know how it works with fear. I'm not afraid, but I hope you're not fearful of this. But the more you think about it, and if you think it's kind of cool or whatever, the more it will happen to you. As a matter of fact, I even thought the whole thing with the dogs, may have happened exactly because I just finished posting my response on the forum about the invisible person. I'm like, yes, this is happening a lot. And I'm convinced that cats do it a lot. I mean, I'm telling you how often it seems like I've shut a cat up in a room for one reason or another, and I don't take more than a couple steps, and that door is still closed or whatever, and the cat's on the other side of the house. And I think cats are just, cats are tuned into this kind of stuff. They've always been the creatures who sense a lot of things, who can see spirits. There's a lot of stories about cats who are in hospice facilities, and the cats who will, they'll go out in the room where a person's getting ready to, to leave this plane and move on to the next. But there's a few other things I wanted to mention that are interesting and different to me. So one is, and I put it on the title of this video, this idea of Mandela effects. So, almost everybody who's watching this knows what a Mandela effect is. Don't need to go back into a definition, really. And some of you may realize that this idea of a Mandela effect, they can also flip. So, for example, one of the ones that is the most obvious to me, Mandela effects, is Chick-fil-A, right? So it is actually spelled just like a chick, but I remember being in a similar situation as this right now, waiting for somebody, I think even my husband again, waiting for him while I'm sitting in the truck next to, across the street from a Chick-fil-A, and really looking at the sign for so long and having this long internal conversation about why they ever thought that chick should be spelled C-H-I-C, because that's also the word chic. And nobody wants to eat a chic chicken. And I'm, as a designer and an artist, that had bothered me for so long, why that they did this with Chick-fil-A. And then of course now it's C-H-I-C-K, and for some people they remember C-H-I-K. Well, a flip would be, as an example, is if I would wake up tomorrow and find that Chick-fil-A was back to being C-H-I-C. That would be a flip. So some people are reporting flips, right? Yeah, Sherry says she knows it as Chick-fil-A too. I know. I always thought that was just the dumbest thing. I even imagined like a board of directors. I know. Let's name it this, C-H-I-C. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did anyone not use a dictionary? Anyway, so there's a lot of that flip-flopping. Okay, so the concept of flip-flopping. But here's the really interesting part that I've recently become aware of. There are people who are seeing this flip-flop happen in real time. And some of the most interesting stories, meaning, as an example, if I would be looking at a Chick-fil-A sign, seeing it one thing, and in the next blink or in the next second, seeing it shift to the other. That can give you some real pause, can't it? Right? And some of the best conversations I've seen about this actually have been on the internet. And what I have seen is a group of people. The very best conversation I saw was when a group of people who were interested in the Mandela effect were speaking about this with each other. And they were focusing on, and I don't remember the subject or the event or the effect. It may have been Jif peanut butter, or Jiffy peanut butter. And the really interesting thing is a lot of people were looking up some things. So they were looking up visual confirmations of what they remembered or what the Mandela effect was. And this whole group of people, I think there was like 5 of them, while they are discussing this, while they have other windows open in our computer, the flip happens right then while they're discussing this. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Something to think about, right? So I haven't seen or heard many instances of that, but I think it's happening, and I think you're going to see more and more of that happening, which is, cray cray. Right. Oh, hi everyone. Gosh, it's so nice to see you all. Okay, so let's see. I wrote a couple notes here because I did. Oh, this one. This is a really, really cool one. So we've talked a little bit about objects, right? Some very interesting things about objects that disappear, reappear, disappear, etc. My own, look, it's Shane. Now that's your Mandela effect expert, unbiased and on the fence. Shane is on the chat right now, and if you want to know anything about the Mandela effect, friend or foe, there's actually a book. It sits on my bedside. Shane Robinson wrote this fascinating book with a couple other people. Maybe he'll put a link in the chat for us. And but this flip-flopping while they're looking at it thing, that concept has really, really stuck with me, Shane. I think I actually even texted you about that later. By the way, I sent you an email or a text or something about something recently. It's time sensitive. Take a look at your text messages. Maybe you missed it. I missed a few myself over Thanksgiving, but there's something, an interesting opportunity I sent your way, I think via text message. Check that out real quick. So objects, right? So this idea of telekinesis or things happening with objects, I've been interested in this always. I mean, aren't we all? But the one big event that I had happened to me in the mid 1980s before I got into this work. But when I was highly charged up psychically, I didn't know it at the time. During this time, I was having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, and my whole energy system was revved up, and I didn't know what the freak was going on with me. I mean, I've quickly learned after reading Robert Monroe's book that everything was fine, but I had a lot of stuff happening. And here's what happened this day. I was going through art school. My husband was gone. He was temporary duty somewhere. I remember that I took the whole day to clean up the entire house. And then I was going to stretch a great big canvas in the living room after I cleaned up everything. And we didn't have much at the time. There was a coffee table there, one that I made, a sofa. There was hardly anything in that room, and I kept it that way because I really liked the space for a few different things. And so anyway, there I was with a canvas, and I was in my canvas frame, and all I needed was my staple gun, the canvas, and the frame. To stretch this canvas, and I needed some scissors, not really to cut the canvas, but you have to snip it and then you tear it because it tears straight down the canvas. And I brought all those things. I grabbed the scissors and the staple gun together in one hand, and I brought them and I set them on the table, and I moved the table over, and I laid out the canvas. I put the frame on top. It was a big painting, and I got on top and had it all ready, had my staple gun, and all I needed was the scissors to clip the canvas so I could tear it. And they were gone. And I knew I brought them in here. I guess I'm transporting to that room. I brought them into the room. I'd set them on the coffee table, and they weren't there. And I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, what was on the coffee table? There was a stack of some art magazines, and that was it. I'd set my things there, and I just couldn't understand how my scissors were like gone. And I walked around the room for a little bit in circles and just mystified. And then I found myself getting very kind of worked up about this, where are my scissors? I mean, it was a little bit like this, I just don't understand it. Where are my scissors? I'm having this little mini fit while I'm standing there. And you know what? The scissors actually were on the table. The stack of magazines had kind of slipped like this, the bottom was like this, and the scissors were underneath the edge of the top magazine. But that isn't why I'm telling you the story. I didn't know that. Here's how I know the scissors were actually on the table, because I'm like 10, 12 feet away from the table, and I'm having my little, where are my scissors moment. And I watched those scissors slide all on their own out from underneath the top edge of that top magazine, and they slid all the way over to the end of the table, and I stopped my fit in the middle, and I went, my gosh, how did that happen? I stood stock still in my room for, I'm sure, a little while before I even moved or even took a breath, because I'm like, what? How did that happen? I mean, after a while, I went over and I picked up the scissors. I mean, I'm glad they didn't fly across the room or anything like that. But that's my biggest telekinesis story. But, you know, kind of what is that, right? Looking into this idea of telekinesis more closely in the future, one of the best explanations that I have found for something like what happened to my scissors is this idea of me having this strong desire to be in the reality where the scissors are on the table and visible to me. Okay. And I'm currently not in that reality. And we know that motion, movement, physicality, you know, life like we know it, like this movement through it is just instantaneous small snapshots of that. So one theory about what actually might have happened is telekinesis isn't exactly the idea of an object moving on its own, but me switching realities as the object makes its way to the other end of the table. Does that make sense? So like you're flipping through a bunch of realities and my consciousness becomes aware of that flip and I watch the scissors slide across the table. So that, I like that explanation of that. And that's how I tend to think of telekinesis these days. But I wanted to talk about this other cool thing that I've read, and this is brand new. I've never read this anywhere until just recently. And it's this with the old objects disappearing, reappearing in different places, right? So there's many stories of this. It wasn't there and now it's there. Some people have very personalized things like jewelry that are gone for decades and then return. One client I had, the story went that she had this amazing set of earrings and she lost one of the earrings, but she kept the mate. And when she was in a hotel room on the other side of the planet, like decades later, in the ashtray, I think, on the dresser, she wakes up and the next day and the earring is there in a hotel room. I mean, crazy stuff like that, like objects, it's starting to rain, objects appearing and disappearing. But here's the cool part, that's not new, but here's the cool part, and the new thing for me is there's this idea that, or these reports that, I should say, and the one I'm remembering most is a toy. So somebody has a toy, and I don't know, it's a toy they had, small toy, handheld size kind of toy, a wooden toy, I think is what it was. And this wooden toy is, it goes missing, right? And they look and look for it, and this is an adult, but for some reason they have this little toy. It may have been a party favor, I don't even remember what, but it's a small little wooden toy. And it goes missing, and later it reappears. Except for this time, it reappears as a different age than when he lost it. So as an example, it's a, I don't know, it's some sort of toy with, let's say, worn paint and smooth edges or something like that. And it's a very unique, very personal toy that he's carried around forever and ever. And suddenly, when it's gone and it comes back like in practically new shape, where the paint and everything else, and he finds it in his house near the place where he lost it. And the toy is, much younger than the toy that he lost. And where I was reading this conversation, I think it may have been on Reddit or someplace like that on the internet, where that conversation goes, suddenly these other people are talking about the same thing that's happened to them, where the object comes and goes and is a different age. And then something even more interesting, some people report that then both objects are there. So as an example, I'm not sure it happened in this case, but as an example, after seeing the newer toy show up in his house, a little bit later, he gets the old toy back as well, and he has both of them there. And that's crazy. Just some really, really crazy stories going on. So I thought that was pretty interesting. A couple other things that I thought was interesting too is that I've read people talk about lately is the sun blinking. And a lot of people talk about it as in terms of videos, which, you know, you can always say are camera artifacts. I get a lot of camera artifacts myself. I understand all that. But what's interesting to me is when people have friends or they're with somebody else and people look at each other and mention to each other that, did you just see that? And the other person would be like, the sun just did a blink. And that's pretty interesting. So that's something else I thought was interesting to think about. And I wrote one more thing down, and I'm kind of running out of time. I got to go around the corner and pick up my husband. I have a friend who may or may not see this on, I'll post the video on Facebook later. But after her mama passed, she's very, very awake, very interested in all of this human consciousness expansion stuff. She's very connected, gets communication from other realms all the time. And her mother had passed, and her siblings had gathered around. And I think it was her brother who was not so open to this kind of stuff, right? Her brother, who is very scientific, very conventional, very skeptical. And it was after their mother's passing, and they were a group of the siblings there. I believe there's 3 or 4 of them in total. And they actually were standing in front of a table where their mother's photograph was. And all of them, all at the same time, saw this photograph animate itself and, you know, shift and phase and do something like smile and hold up her hand or something. And they all saw it. And this small event changed that man's life. I mean, you know, after the next couple seconds, they all blink and it goes back into what they saw before. But it was a shared experience, right? They could all talk about, what did you see? How did you see it? We all saw it at the exact same time. What was that? And of course, this singular event changes particularly that man's life, who is, you know, hasn't been open to any of this, you know, kind of ever, but is standing alongside his sister, who's completely open to this. And the experience is provided for him for growth and expansion, and, you know, and not a small amount of counseling for new grief, right? Losing a parent. Well, everybody, I'm already out of time. I'm going to have to take my leave of you. I want to thank you all for joining me today, and leave stories, leave links. You know, what kind of these experiences have you all experienced yourself or have heard about? Or, you know, more than anything, where can you go to read some of this? I love continually finding out different places to access this kind of information, get different opinions, different experiences to read about. Thank you all who showed up today, and I'll try to do more of these. And for right now, I'm going to have to go. Bless you all. Love you all. Till next time. Bye, everyone.